This is the BBC.
This podcast is supported by advertising outside the UK.
BBC Sounds. Music, radio, podcasts.
Thank you for downloading this podcast of The World at One from BBC Radio 4. Hello and welcome to The World at One with me, Sarah Montague. British Steel has collapsed and been placed in compulsory liquidation.
I'm disgusted.
I think we ought to just talk about
it's terrible. I feel like Beeling. We haven't been told. I've just heard it on the radio. Nothing's been said by any of our bosses or anything.
5,000 workers in the company could lose their jobs. We'll hear what the government plans to do. Theresa May is under fire over her new Brexit plan.
Isn't this New Deal just a fantasy?
It seems there is no escape from reality. We'll try to work out what happens next. With European elections in the next few days, Mark Mardell reports on the newly refashioned hard right in France.
You can talk about a kind of populist international with a French nuance, but I think that involves actually being young, hip and fascist.
And
if you serve the country, then you should know about sovereignty, you should know about democracy.
And I know about people with big mouths and access to a keyboard as well.
The Brexiteers rowing outside Parliament. Has everyone stopped listening to each other? The BBC News is read by Chris Aldridge.
British Steel has collapsed, putting thousands of jobs in the UK at risk. The company, which has plants in Scunthorpe and Teesside, was put into receivership after the breakdown of rescue talks with the government. The official receiver will now run the firm while attempts are made to find a buyer. Here's our business correspondent, Jonty Bloom.
British Steel has been struggling for years. It was sold for just £1 3 years ago as it was losing money to a company called Greybull Capital, which specialises in trying to turn around failing businesses. Workers took cuts to their pay and pensions, but the business has been hit by high energy prices, a falling pound, which puts up the cost of raw materials, and a world market flooded by cheap steel made in developing countries. On top of all that, Brexit hit the business hard. It had to borrow more than £100 million from the government, which has refused to lend it any more because it does not believe it could do so legally. More than 4,000 jobs at British Steel are now at risk, and 20,000 more in the company's extensive supply chain.
Theresa May is facing mounting pressure from Conservative MPs to step down immediately amid growing signs that her latest Brexit plan is facing defeat in Parliament. Many Tories who previously backed her deal now say they'll vote against it, and questions are being asked about whether the latest version will even be put before the Commons next month. The Conservative Backbench 1922 committee is due to vote tonight on whether the party's rules can be changed to allow another challenge to Mrs May's leadership. From Westminster, our assistant political editor, Norman Smith.
Theresa May today stood by her battered Brexit bill, insisting it would enable the Commons to come to a decision about the UK's future relationship with the EU. Support for it, however, appears to be rapidly crumbling, with a steady flow of Tory MPs who'd previously backed it now saying they'll vote against. There's also growing speculation the Prime Minister could have to abandon the bill after Michael Gove refused twice to confirm it would be brought before the Commons to be voted on in the first week of June. There have also been renewed calls for Mrs May to go. Tonight's 1922 meeting of Tory backbenchers will vote on whether to change the leadership rules to allow an immediate challenge. The former Cabinet Minister, Priti Patel, has also called for a shakeout of the Cabinet, who she said had failed and just sat back and supported the Prime Minister.
A second senior Conservative, Lord Cooper, has had the party whip removed for saying he plans to vote for the Liberal Democrats in tomorrow's European elections. On Monday, the former Tory Deputy Prime Minister, Lord Heseltine, suffered the same punishment for saying he would vote for them because of the government's Brexit policy. Lord Cooper was David Cameron's Director of Strategy in Downing Street. Britain's biggest mobile operator, EE, has said it won't offer Huawei handsets to its customers when it launches its superfast 5G network in 6 cities next week. US government regulations have blacklisted the Chinese technology firm because of fears about possible spying by the Chinese government, something which Beijing denies. In the past few minutes, Vodafone has also suspended pre-orders of Huawei 5G smartphones. More details from our technology correspondent, Rory Kethlen-Jones.
EE has raced ahead of its rivals with its plan to launch 5G next week and claims that for once the UK is at the front of the pack in rolling out the next generation mobile phone networks. But the launch was overshadowed by the row over Huawei. EE confirmed that it had cancelled plans to offer one of the Chinese firm's 5G handsets, but it will use Huawei equipment in its network, despite the fact that the government is yet to say whether it plans to ban the company from any involvement in 5G. Meanwhile, the UK-based chip designer ARM has told its staff to stop working with Huawei to comply with the US order banning links with the firm. ARM's designs are integral to most of the world's smartphones, so in the longer term, Huawei could be forced to design its own chips to stay competitive.
The rate of inflation reached its highest level this year last month as energy bills and holiday flights pushed up prices. The Office for National Statistics said the Consumer Price Index was 2.1% in April, up from 1.9% the month before. Our personal finance correspondent Simon Gompertz reports.
In April, 15 million households on standard variable energy tariffs and prepayment meters saw their bills increase by more than £100 a year. The jump in the cost of flights came because of Easter, when they tend to be more expensive. Petrol and diesel went up as well. But keener prices for hotel rooms, computer games, cigarettes and beer kept the overall rate from rising faster. At 2.1%, it's the first time this year that inflation has gone above the Bank of England's target of 2%. That matters because the standard tool the bank uses to put the lid on price increases is to raise interest rates, though while the uncertainty over Brexit persists, it looks unlikely that the bank will risk putting up the cost of borrowing.
Police and customs officers from across Europe have dismantled an international crime gang involved in drug and cigarette smuggling, money laundering and murder. Raids coordinated by the European Union's law enforcement body Europol took place in 4 countries, including the UK, last week. The gang is believed to have made more than £600 million in the past 2 years alone. 22 people have been arrested and cash, jewellery and luxury vehicles were seized.